Hello, hello, hello. We're going to talk about something different. We are going to be talking about just a lack of insight. I was watching TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I do watch, some of the TikToks. And I saw this TikTok about this young lady. She is a millennial and she is crying, and I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on here? And she said she went to apply for some jobs. I'm like, well, hey, 2023 has been hard. Good on you for getting yourself out there. We all know that we're in the fourth quarter. Very few people are hiring. But hey, girl, put them applications in. But she's crying. And she said, I went to an interview. I'm like, hey, not only did you get an application in, you got an interview. Why are you crying? These are good things. And she said, crying, I mean tears flowing down her face. She goes, I told them that I'm time blind and need accommodation. And the interviewer shut her down and ended the interview and went on, and she's crying. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is something I haven't heard of. Let your fingers do the walking. I go to Google. What is time blindness? So, time blindness is the inability to sense when time has passed and estimate the time needed to get something done. It is not an official diagnosis, but it can significantly affect how you plan and carry out your daily activities. This definition was set out by the Attention Deficit Disorder Association. So I'm like, okay, so this is not a official, and it's not official, but it's an issue. And I'm like, okay, Becky, she's crying. It seems a little extreme for just one interview, but I understand if you have impediments to employment, because I have certainly suffered through that myself. So I'm kind of thinking back. I'm like, Becky, has there ever been a time when time has gotten away from you? You've not scheduled time appropriately. It made you miss work. Other things that you were scheduled to do. And yeah, I think we've all been there. Now, she is a millennial. She is in her 20s. And I don't know if it's early, mid, or late 20s. It looked like early to mid 20s. And I remember just becoming an adult. And I remember having to be responsible for the first time. Not only just to myself, because my parents taught me to be responsible to myself. So, get homework done, get your chores done, start learning to manage money. My parents made all of us learn how to cook, clean, change the oil, change a tire, how to, do some basic stuff. They were very private financially, but we were told, like, my mother would send each of us with our father to go do shopping when we were teens, 15, 16, 17, 18. And we would have to do the shopping for the family for a week based on the amount of money she sent with our dad. And he would not really help with that. It was part of us learning the value of $1 and how to feed 5 people. But that's just kind of getting away, So I learned some responsibility. But when I became an adult, and you have to get to your classes in college on time, you have to get to doctor's appointments on time, you have to get to your activities on time, you have to get to work on time. That could be a struggle in your 20s when you're first learning. So I get that. That's not what she is saying, though. She is saying she has time blindness to an extent that she needs an accommodation from work, because she's telling the lady in the interview this is what's going on. Now, what isn't a reasonable accommodation? Again, Google. A reasonable accommodation is an adjustment made in a system to accommodate or to make fair, the same system for an individual based on a proved need. That need can vary. Accommodations can be religious, physical, mental, emotional, academic, or employment related, and the law often mandates them. So it has to be reasonable. So it's something that the employer will do, provide, take away, encourage, that allows a would-be employee or a current employee meet the same standards of work that a regular healthy employee can do. So that's kind of, that's not, might not be the nuts and bolts of it, but that's kind of a general idea of what a reasonable accommodation is. So let's break down the time blindness. So if you have an issue, like I suffered from crippling agoraphobia for a long time, and agoraphobia is fear of going outside. I literally did not leave my house for 2 months one time. Literally, it was that bad. So when I realized it was impacting my life, classes weren't being going to, doctor's appointments weren't being going to, I lost my job, didn't show up for 2 months. I reached out because I still had some health insurance at the time. I was in my early 20s and started on a path of learning how to have coping skills and deal with this through exposure therapy, CBT, all that other good stuff. I'm not agoraphobic now. It makes me uncomfortable to go long distances, but it's not like, okay. But the difference is I recognize there's an issue. She recognizes there's an issue. I took steps to address that issue because as an adult, if you were 18 years or older, you are responsible. You're not responsible for your problems if you didn't cause them. Like, for example, agoraphobia, I'm not responsible for having it necessarily. But I am responsible for dealing with it 100%. So I'm not saying it's my fault I'm agoraphobic. It's not her fault she's got time blindness. But you are responsible for dealing with it. So this is where we're going to come into the thumbnail. This is why you don't get hired. Stop telling employers that you can't come to work on time. Okay, in the job descriptions of every work from home job that I've ever seen in these past 6 years, training is 100% attendance mandatory. Whether that's 1 day or 10 months. It is 100% mandatory. You have to show up on time. Okay? If you are unable to show up on time to any employment, and a reasonable accommodation says that you have to meet the same standards I do, Sally does, Mark does, John does, Paul does, Erica, whoever is at work with you. You have to meet the same standard. Okay? You do. You have to meet that same standard. They're going to help you meet that standard, but you do have to meet that standard. So, for example, time blindness, you still have to show up on time. They may give you 5 minutes. But, most jobs, even though it's 100% mandatory, gave a 5 to 10 minute window at the beginning. Here's some things she could have done. If they had asked about previous employment and she admitted to being let go for tardy issues, she could say, I now have addressed that through therapy, and I now set a watch, write out a schedule. Listen, Walmart still sells clocks. You can set a clock on your phone. You can set 4 or 5 alarms. So say work starts at 8, 6, 6:20, 6:45, 7. 4 alarms. Different alarm noises right next to your head. One of those is going to get you up. You should pre-plan your morning. And you all have heard me say over and over about pre-planning for these mornings, okay? You have heard me. That means you have your lunch pre-done. If you're working from home, you have your lunch done. If you have a problem getting up in the mornings and doing things, do what I do. Take your shower the night before. Lay your clothes out. So you get up, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, brush your teeth, and yes, that's brush your teeth twice. And put your clothes on, get you ready, go to work. Make sure, and this is where I put for myself, when I had a hard time learning to do that, I taught myself, even though I wasn't working from home, to show up to work 15 minutes early so that your system's up and ready. And I tell people this. It helps, okay? Don't be last minute Susie Q. This is also like if you're a felon. You could put will discuss instead of saying yes. Okay? Yes, no, we'll discuss. Because maybe you're a felon and it was 20 years ago and it wasn't violent, it was stupid. That's different than murder or child pornography. But yeah, don't do what this girl did on TikTok. Okay, so don't do what this girl does. Do not bring up to any interview any excuse to not hire you. Okay? And time blindness isn't even an official diagnosis. Having difficulties keeping to a schedule can occur to a number of people due to a number of reasons, but you are still 100% responsible for getting to work on time. Let me talk to you a little bit more, and I know this video has gone on long, but I can't stress this enough. This is why people don't get hired, okay? This is why they end up on TikTok crying, okay? I understand. You have a problem with your scheduling and time and attendance, okay? That's a valid thing. Do not tell your interviewer you need an accommodation because you are not going to show up on time to work. Nobody in this work environment is going to hire you, okay, if you tell them that. Showing up to work on time is a huge issue, even that face companies, even from people that don't have mental health issues and emotional issues, okay? There are people who are lazy. There are people who do not handle their responsibilities in the morning very well. There are people who, for whatever reason, maybe you took a medication the night before, you're sick, you're just not getting there on time, you're not mentally alert, I understand. But you're still responsible for it. Like, for example, the company I was just with, Dynata. My power cord, we had a video about what happened with the power cord, how it snapped, all that other BS. Okay, it's my responsibility to have had an extra power cord, and I did not. So not being there anymore is my fault. Now, it's not my fault that it snapped. That happened, but it is my responsibility to have extra cords and to have plenty of extra equipment that I should have only, if I had an extra cord, I could have just been in and out within 5 minutes. 5 minutes if I had an extra cord. Okay. So my live and learn is have extra power cord. And I tell people, learn from Becky's problem. Extra power cord. Okay. So we've done hammered on that. There are things you can talk about or say we'll discuss with an interviewer. Okay. If you think you have a problem meeting any work obligation, you're going to need to talk to your doctor, because if you want an accommodation, your doctor will have to fill out the form. Your doctor will have to specify what kind of accommodation you need and for how long. Not showing up on time is not going to cut it. Ever. There is no reasonable accommodation for tardiness, no matter the reason. Whether you're time blind, tired, sick, medication, kids, daycare hours, you can't come in, yeah. And for that, I tell people to go to 1099 companies to have a more flexible schedule. I mean, there are ways you can get around that, but the company you're going to probably isn't it. Okay, enough of me complaining. Y'all have a good one.